Sipping their warm morning coffee at a cafe, Tim stared blankly at his cup while endlessly stirring it. Tim contemplated if he had made a rash decision. Rick looked at Tim while smiling, almost giggling to himself. "I couldn't sleep the entire night and you still find this funny," said Tim. Rick couldn't help himself after remembering how Tim glowed with joy when he first bought his apartment. For a month, Rick had to listen to Tim brag about how amazing the deal was. This was, of course, before Tim moved in. So, to see Tim turn pale after only a night in the apartment was ironically funny to him. Not knowing how else to comfort his buddy, Rick said, "It's not that I want to make you feel worse or anything, but don't you find it strange that the seller sold the house at such a low price? He seemed so desperate that he was okay to make such a loss. But he seemed to have a good reason. He said that his wife had left him, and he wanted to leave the country immediately to start anew," explained Tim. "Let's say you were him, and you know that the house is haunted. Wouldn't you say whatever it is needed to convince the buyer?" asked Rick. Tim stayed quiet and seemed to have gone back into his own thoughts. Tim was recalling what happened last night. Tired from the long day, Tim was excited to fall asleep in his new place. Before he knew it, he dozed off. But suddenly, Tim woke up in the middle of the night feeling really uneasy. At first, he thought that he had felt that way because he was in a new environment. So he thought nothing of it, just a new place and new whistling sounds which sounded like whispers. Tim tried to fall asleep again, but the sound started becoming more distinct. "Please," as the voice sobbed. Instinctively knowing that it was definitely not whispers of the wind, Tim jumped out of bed in his t-shirt and shorts and ran out of his apartment to take a cab to his parents' place and slept there for the night. To snap Tim back to reality, Rick began conversing again. "You must have imagined it, man. You scare too easily. It wasn't as though someone was having a long conversation with you. That would have been clear. This was just a couple of words that you could have thought you heard." "So you really think it was just me being tired?" said Tim, seeking further confirmation. "For sure. It was probably sounds that you interpreted as words yourself," said Rick. "Maybe," said Tim. Suddenly looking at Rick, Tim continued, "I know this sounds like a weird idea, but can you sleep over just for tonight?" Seeing how Rick was giving him a weird look, Tim continued, "Come on, you can have the bed. I'll sleep in my sleeping bag on the floor next to the bed." "Fine. I'll have to ask my wife first if she's okay with it," said Rick. The sleepover began, and both of them reminisced the good old times they had when they were young, the girls they tried talking to, how they failed miserably, and how time passed by so quickly. Their conversation went on till late, till both unknowingly fell asleep. But soon after, the voice reappeared again. This time, it was Rick who woke up to the voice, a female voice. Rick was beginning to wonder if what Tim said was indeed true, and that it wasn't the whispering of the wind. As someone who didn't believe in ghosts, Rick was more curious than afraid. Sleeping on the floor right next to him, Rick nudged Tim with his toe to wake him up. Hearing the rustling sound of the sleeping bag, Rick knew that Tim was starting to wake up. "Tim, can you hear that?" whispered Rick. "You can hear that too?" murmured Tim as he slowly opened his eyes. Carefully getting out of bed, Rick reached for the room light. "It's coming from outside. We have to take a look." "Are you nuts?" whispered Tim in an instant. "We have to find out. Maybe your neighbor's having an argument," said Rick. As Rick turned the doorknob and slowly inched his way out of the bedroom and into the living room, Tim followed closely behind. They turned on the lights and noticed that the sound was still there. In fact, the sorrow in the voice became more distinct, and it became obvious that the sound wasn't music playing. "Damn it, I can't do this, Rick," said Tim as he followed Rick closely behind as they walked to the other end of the living room where the sound was coming from. As Rick reached the wall at the other end, the sound was clear. It was right behind the wall. The sound seemed to come from his neighbor's home. Rick then gently placed his ear on the wall while putting both palms against it and listened closely for a good 10 seconds. All Rick said to Tim next was, "This is so weird," as he slowly pulled away from the wall, but still staring closely at it. Tim stood there looking at Rick, hoping Rick would provide him a little more details. All Rick said with a slight crack in his voice was, "Pack up your stuff, man. I think it's best we stay at my place for tonight. We'll come back tomorrow morning." Knowing that there was more to it, but didn't dare to ask, Tim did as Rick said and packed his stuff as they both left the apartment. The next morning, as planned, they both went back to Tim's apartment. "What are you doing?" asked Tim after seeing Rick taking measurements of Tim's living room. Seemingly done with what he was doing, Rick finally said, "Okay, let's go." "Where to?" said Tim. "Just follow my lead. We're going to your neighbor's place," said Rick. Knocked on the neighbor's door, an elderly man appeared. "Hi, sir. I'm your new neighbor, and this is my friend," said Rick, playing the role of the neighbor, knowing that his buddy Tim won't be able to pull the plan off. With a glowing smile, the elderly man said, "It's nice to know our neighbors. The previous owners didn't even introduce themselves, not even a hello, and we crossed paths. Please, come in." Putting on a friendly aura, Rick continued chatting with the elderly man as they entered the house and sat on the living room couch. After chatting for a bit, Rick swerved the conversation towards the actual reason he was there. "Oh yes, sir, my friend here doesn't believe that all our home's living rooms are equally spacious. Do you mind if I took the measurement of your living room area so I can finally prove to him?" Whipping out his measuring tape with slight embarrassment at doing this in someone else's home, Rick knew that he had no choice. They then continued chatting for a little longer before Rick and Tim took their leave from their neighbor's home. Afterwards, Rick and Tim went to the building management's office to ask if there had been any alterations done to Tim's home. After confirming that no changes have been made, Rick said to Tim, "Now that we know there's no alterations officially done, why is the length of your neighbor's living room almost 2 feet longer? I think there might be a false wall built in your place." "Okay, that's weird. Why would the previous owner put a false wall 2 feet in front of an actual wall?" said Tim as he picked up his phone to call his contractor over. They finally met up with the contractor at Tim's apartment later that day. After knocking on the hollow parts of the wall, the contractor said, "Okay, I am pretty sure this part is a false wall. Is it all right if I knock this down?" asked the contractor. After Tim gave the green light, the contractor picked up his sledgehammer and began knocking down the wall. Little by little, a hole in the wall opened up. At first, dried up hair began to show from behind the wall. As the wall was hacked downwards, a partially protruding skull was then seen. The contractor continued hacking away at the wall, and eventually, The image of a severely decomposed person was seen as clear as daylight. A brown, almost fully rotten figure stood there with its eyes blankly staring back at them. A face, barely recognizable due to the rot and chest filled with maggots. The contractor, Rick, and Tim all froze with their faces beginning to turn pale. The smell of the rotten flesh slowly crept up on them and made them stutter in their steps backwards. They covered their mouths from the stench and looked down on the floor, no longer able to withstand the image standing right before them. None of them said anything for a good minute, seemingly lost at the situation and digesting what they had actually seen. One by one, still in a semi-traumatic state, they stutter out of the home so that they no longer have to see the body. The smell, however, followed them out. "What was that?" said Tim, barely able to speak as he wanted to puke from the stench. "How did you know about that, Rick?" continued Tim. Still covering his mouth, Rick began to speak. "Remember last night when I placed my ear on the wall?" "Yeah," said Tim. "When I closely listened, I kid you not, the voice said, 'Please, I'm inside the wall,'" explained Rick. Not knowing what to make out of this whole situation, all three of them just stood there. Slightly calmed down, they eventually called for the police. After months of investigation, they finally found out that the previous homeowner had caught his wife having an affair and murdered her. To hide his tracks, he built a false wall and hid her inside before selling the house. The police also said that from the severity of the decomposition, the lady had been dead for months before she was found. After the traumatic experience, it didn't take Tim more than a minute to decide to sell the apartment and move back in with his parents. How about you? Have you heard sounds coming from your neighboring apartments? The usual sounds of chairs being dragged or marbles being dropped? It must have been the neighbors. What else could it have been, right?